Well, good morning. It's good to be here. We had a good reminder, Thanksgiving service, to be thankful for the church. And I just reminded that, I don't think I ever heard a Thanksgiving service being thankful for the church, but I am thankful. I enjoyed the Sunday school time. I could see Daryl's father example rubbing off in Jaron. I see the father-son connection, and that's neat. All of us have been affected by our dads, one way or the other. Definitely see that in the Seibel family, so thanks for being here. As far as what Dan was saying, that's definitely mutual. I appreciate what Dan brings to the church. I told him already not too long ago, I see him bringing more than what I did. He's an asset, so thank you for allowing God to work through you and your family, the church here. Been a good job. Sooner or later, I'll need to hand that to another brother. So that's life, growing old gracefully. This morning I'd like to invite you to turn with me to Judges chapter 6, a story we'd like to look at this morning. Think of Thanksgiving we just came through. We do have a lot to be thankful for as people. How do we respond when unpleasant things happen? Are we thankful for them as well? God enjoys showing his power in the midst of unpleasant situations, circumstances. He enjoys showing his power. Friday, we were up with my son and his family, and my sister, or our daughter, Krista, their family, at his cabin, do a little hunting yesterday, and so we went to a little scouting Friday evening, and so we lived, his cabin just north of State College. We went out on 322, we were heading north, some state game lands, and we came up on an overturned vehicle in the right lane in the bank, and it looked like something had just happened. There was one or two other people there. Said, I think we should pull off and see if they need help. The thing was overturned and pointing the opposite direction, so it's something that happened pretty radically. And the thing was smashed. I thought, wow, is there anyone in there that's alive? You know, it looked pretty flat. And I saw an arm sticking out the one window. I thought, oh no, this doesn't look good. But when you know, as it all came out, the guy, probably my age or older, was able to crawl out. His wife was trapped on the other side, so there was people there. We had to break the window out, got her out, and it was all God ordained. There was a girl showed up, it was an EMT, and she had her medical bag along, and she brought that over quickly, and she was giving orders. She says, I need blankets. I thought, well, I have a little flimsy one in the vehicle, so I got that one out. But it was a little breezy, a little windy there, and I thought of my wife's prized fleece blanket. But, well, you know what? We'll sacrifice that for this lady that's in trauma and needing to stay warm. So we got that out, and we did get it back later. But I have a picture of this lady, dear lady, with my wife's fleece blanket, just trying to stay warm. And, you know, it had a good outcome. And the man was standing there looking at his truck, said, well, I think that's totaled. I really like that truck. But I said, you know, the biggest blessing is no one was hurt seriously. No one was killed. I mean, looking at the picture, you say, wow, how could anyone survive? So even in tough situations, there's usually a blessing that we can find. And I was just blessed that people showed up that knew what they were doing. And it was just in the midst of unpleasant circumstances, you saw God working. And this guy recognized, he said, you know, I think God still has some things for me to do. That was his comment. And I thought, wow. So anyhow, I'd like to entitle my message, Lessons from the Life of Gideon. I used this one years ago, pulled this out of my files from 2003. And at that time, we had children. I think the oldest was maybe 15 or 16, and I had them sing the song about Gideon. I don't have that opportunity to do that this morning. We have grandchildren close to the age of what our children were back then. But it's still a lot of truth here for us today. The name Gideon means warrior. And we'll see a little later in this story, Gideon's name was changed to a different name. So names do have meanings. The names that we carry with us, carry some weight. I don't know how it was when you named your children. You that have children, but someone that you appreciated or respect you're quicker to name your children after them. Isn't that right? And if someone that you didn't really respect, well, we won't use that name for our children. Names carry some meaning. Names carry significance. And us parents, as we give our children names, that's something they'll have for life. To think about that, think seriously, because that does carry meaning. Gideon's name here was warrior. Maybe a little background here. So Gideon was a judge for the Israelites. He was called by God through an angel here in the story to deliver the Israelites from the oppression of the Midianites. Gideon was next in line after Deborah, judge. So Judges 6 through 9 cover the time between Joshua, its first leader in the Promised Land, to Saul, anointed king. It's a whole line of judges that gave leadership to Israel. And Gideon was one of them. He was next in line after Deborah. Read the first 10 verses of Judges chapter 6 for background here, for a springboard for a message. Judges 6, verse 1 through 10. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel, and because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made them dens which are in the mountains, and caves and strongholds. So they were hiding. And so it was when Israel had sown that the Midianites came up, and the Amalekites and the children of the east, even they came up against them, and they encamped against them and destroyed the increase of the earth. So they were taking away their food supply. Till thou come unto Gaza, which I'm assuming might be the same Gaza we have today, and left no sustenance for Israel, neither sheep, nor ox, nor ass. For they came up with their cattle and their tents, and they came as grasshoppers for multitude. For both they and their camels were without number, and they entered into the land to destroy it. And Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites. And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. And it came to pass, when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord because of the Midianites, that the Lord sent a prophet unto the children of Israel, which said unto them, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I brought you up from Egypt. I brought you forth out of the house of bondage. I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of all that oppressed you, and drave them out from before you, and gave you their land. And I said unto you, I am the Lord your God. Fear not the gods of the Amorites, in whose land ye dwell, but ye have not obeyed my voice. Sort of the sad cycle of the Israelites found themselves in. And here we find them sort of at the bottom of the basement here of their experience. They've been harassed. They've been, and here right after these verses, the Midianites came up, and the Amorites, and came to finish wiping out the Israelites. They were weakened, didn't have their food supply. They were just tormenting them for 7 years, and now they're ready to finish it off. And Israel is finally crying out to God, God, help us. We need you. We are in bad trouble. We need you. And God heard their cry. He was judging them for walking away from God. And here God heard their plea and their cry, and he gave someone to deliver them, sort of like Noah did for the Israelites coming out of Egypt. Here, Gideon his job was to deliver Israel from their problems, get rid of the Midianites. So who were the Midianites? Abraham had 6 sons by Keturah, the wife after Sarah passed away, and one of them was Midian. So it was Abraham's son Midian by Keturah. Obviously, Midian and his descendants weren't following God. They had walked away from God, serving Baal, serving idols. Balaam, the whole story of Balaam involved the Midianites. Balaam went to the Midianites for the money, and he was going to, curse the Israelites. And the Midianite king asked if he could do that for him. He obviously thought there was power in what Balaam said. And we know the story, Balaam and his donkey and those kind of things. And Balaam said, time came, he said, I can't curse the Israelites. He actually blessed them, and the king said, what are you doing? I paid you to curse them. He said, no, I can't. God won't allow me to curse them. I bless them. But he said, I'll tell you something. If you want to get them to fall, if you want to trip them, just intermarry with them. Intermarry with the Israelites and get them to worship your idols. And you'll succeed. You'll trip them. Sure enough, here, the story this morning is a result of Balaam's advice to the Midianites. They intermarried with the Israelites, got them sidetracked, got them their focus away from serving God, and this is where they ended up. I probably could say the same thing with us today, to make sure that we're on the right track, not rubbing shoulders or becoming too much like the world, because that's what tripped up the Israelites. So the Midianites besieged Israel for 7 years, and they were hiding in dens and caves. Whenever they planted crops, the Midianites destroyed them. So they were besieging them with their food supply, just making sure they didn't get food, which is a problem. And then the end of verse 10, but ye have not obeyed my voice. You did all these things for the Israelites that didn't obey him. So this is what happens when you disobey. And then verse 11, Gideon talks about, actually Gideon himself was Manasseh's great-grandson. So who was Manasseh? Manasseh was the oldest of Joseph's children. So we have the 12 tribes of Israel, and we sometimes think, well, it's Jacob's 12 sons. But no, it was actually 10 of Jacob's sons. And Joseph, being a son, gave up Joseph and the Levites. The Levites had no inheritance in the land of promise in Canaan. But so it was the Levites and Joseph were not given a name of a tribe. The two replacements for Joseph and the Levites, Levi, were two of Joseph's sons, which was Ephraim and Manasseh. His oldest son, Manasseh, and Ephraim. So and Manasseh was the biggest tribe, had the most inheritance of the land. There's east, if you look at a map, there was east Manasseh and west Manasseh. So they had the biggest inheritance of land. And this was Gideon was a direct descendant of Manasseh. So the interesting history. So here in verse 11, we find Gideon busy working. God calls people that are already working. You don't call and then you start working. God calls people that are already working. Gideon was a hard worker. He's threshing wheat in the winepress. And that was to deceive the Midianites. They were coming after their wheat. And maybe they didn't bother with the wine supply. But he was, hiding in the winepress, threshing wheat, trying to do his best. Gideon was affected by the sins of his forefathers, which we all are today. We are affected by our parents and our grandparents and the heritage that we have, for good, bad, or otherwise. We inherit rich blessings, but sometimes there's failures of our fathers and our grandfathers that follow on a little bit. That's what Gideon was sort of enduring here, or dealing with. Not that Gideon has such a failure, but his forefathers, the Israelites, had walked away from God. And somehow, in the midst of all that, Gideon was a man of God. So this angel appears to Gideon while he's working. It's in verse 12. He said, "The Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor." So the angel has something to say to Gideon, and he told Gideon, you're a great man of valor. We don't use the word valor so much in today's English, but it's bravery, not being afraid, being brave, having courage. It was a trait that Gideon had, something that God could use in Gideon. And verse 13, Gideon says, "Where is God? Where is God? I don't see him working. I think God forgot about us." That was the mindset that Gideon had. Gideon said, he's looking around, where is God? So he had a question for the angel. You're saying, I'm a brave man and you want to work through me, but where is God? In that sometimes in our situations, we look around, where is God? We get a little cynical sometimes when we see bad things happening, but the angel is here saying, no, I have a job for you to do. And then Gideon goes on in verse 15 to say, well, you want to use me? We're not wealthy people. We don't have money. And I'm the least in my family. I'm not sure what made him think he was the least? Was he the youngest? Was he, I don't know. See, I'm from a poor family and I'm the least. How can you work through me? What are you talking about? And the angel says, I guess Gideon went on and say he wants a sign. He'd like a sign. But I'd like to bring out the point here that God enjoys working through the ones that maybe are the weakest or the least prominent or the lesser. God enjoys working through those people. Why? Because he gets the honor and the glory. And we see over and over in this story, God wanted the honor and the glory through this whole thing. I think it's the same today in our lives. God wants the glory in the things that he does in our lives. He doesn't want us taking that glory. He wants the glory. He's a jealous God. Verse 17, Gideon is asking for a sign. He says, so how do I know that this is legit? How do I know that you're, not just telling me things that aren't going to happen? I need a sign. And the angel, I guess, verse 19, we also see that Gideon was a man of hospitality. The angel was sharing here. And see the same thing in Abraham. When the angel came to Abraham, Abraham offered a meal, hospitality. So another trait I see in Gideon that he was a man of integrity. A man was generous. He made a full meal for this angel. And what did the angel do? He said, put it here in this rock, and Gideon did. He touched it with his staff or a stick or something, and it burned up. And Gideon's like, whoa, this is more than just a normal man. He knew then this was God. So there was a sign. This was God. Verse 22, 23, and 24, Gideon was that surprised and amazed that he was fearful. And that fear is an emotion that I think we all deal with sometimes, especially when God is asking us or putting us on a path of something that maybe looks a little scary or we're not sure about. Gideon felt that way. He's feared. And the angel reassures him, said it'll be okay. And then what's Gideon's response? Gideon's response, verse 24, he worships. And we'll see that several times in this story. When God works, Gideon worships. I don't know how many of you saw the beautiful sunrise this morning before the snow started coming, but beautiful sunrise. And, you just see that God's beauty in nature, and it just makes you worship. Wow, we serve an awesome God. God's mercies are new every morning. The beauty of nature. So it brings worship. Here, Gideon is worshiping. He actually builds an altar and worships God because he knows that God is working. And same night, things were happening pretty quickly here. There wasn't a long lag time where we're waiting. God had it all lined up. And that same night, I guess God told him you got to get rid of your father's altar to Baal. Get rid of it. I think sometimes we need when God gives us a job to do, get rid of some of our parents' baggage. Make sure we're on the right path. I'm not sure why, but the angel wanted him to get rid of that altar to Baal that his dad had and cut down the grove and slaughter one of the steers and build an altar and use that steer that is his dad's bullock and use the wood that he cut down when he cut down the grove, use that for firewood, and he had a larger offering, worshiping at this altar. And that he was a little fearful, so he did it at nighttime. He obeyed the angel, but he did that at nighttime. He was fear. He was afraid of what's going to happen when his father and his father's servants and the neighbors find out what he did. That was sort of bold, wasn't it? Just to take down the altar and cut down the grove and kill one of the steers. God told him to do it, and he obeyed, but there was some fear. And his fear was founded, because the next morning when they found out, they were angry at Gideon, and they wanted to kill him. They came to Gideon's father's house and said, hey, send that son of yours out that's a troublemaker. We're going to get rid of him. And what was Gideon's dad's response? He said, well, Baal will take care of him. Right? They're worshiping Baal. He is something. He said, don't worry about it. Baal will take care of Gideon. Pretty good answer, I would say. And they left it go. So if they really believed in Baal, Baal can take care of himself. And then the interesting thing is his name was changed from Gideon to Jerubbaal. Baal being the end of that name. Contender with Baal. Warrior against Baal. So he was a warrior. Gideon is warrior. Jerubbaal, his new name, is warrior against Baal. So that was just, it was a spiritual struggle here between the true God and this false god, Baal. And Gideon was in the middle of that struggle. So then, didn't take long, the Midianites and the Amalekites, the children of the east, gathered for battle. So today we maybe do war a little different, although somewhat the same. You gather all your soldiers and stage them and get them ready, and then you move forward. That's what they were doing here. All these people, way, way bigger army than Israel had, were gathered, and they knew what was happening. All these people were gathering. Well, we're in trouble. Now we're in big trouble. They're not just starving us. Now they're going to finish us off. And there was fear there as well. Verse 34 I find interesting. Starts out with the word but. But, with all this going on, but the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon. So Gideon had all these good traits in his character, but he needed the Spirit of the Lord as well. And here, verse 14, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon and gave him the strength and the courage to do what he needed to do. God's Spirit. And that's what we need today in our lives, God's Spirit, to lead and guide us and convict us of sin and give us comfort in the hard times. We need God's Spirit. So, verse 36 to 34, God again needs some affirmation. And he lays out the fleece twice. He laid out the fleece one time, make it moist while it's dry, the rest is dry, and the next time make it dry, everything else around it is moist. Puts out it first time, and he says, apologizes to the guy, says, yeah, that's a neat sign, thank you for answering, but could you do it again in reverse? And God obliged him. So I think sometimes in our lives when we're making decisions, how many of us have ever laid out a fleece, so to speak? We use that term, you lay out a fleece. Obviously, we don't do that. It's for things that we know what is right to do, but there's times where this, God asks you to do something and it looks maybe a little scary or odd, or we like direction in life, and we all make decisions every day. I don't think we lay out a fleece on what kind of cereal to have for breakfast, but maybe we just reach for the box, and when it comes out, we take. I don't know how you do your breakfast or what you have for breakfast, but there are more major decisions, like you young people, you're dating, and you think, well, is this the one for me for the rest of my life, or isn't it? But you lay out a fleece. I don't know, not necessarily, but God gives affirmation. That's how God works. He will give you affirmation in your decision in life, and take that seriously. Take your decisions in life seriously. But he will affirm. He's faithful that way. He don't just leave us hanging. He will give affirmation. He gives Gideon here affirmation. He doesn't scold him or say, well, come on, I gave you a job. Don't you believe me? No, he gave him affirmation. And going on to chapter 7, we have this whole, now Gideon has a job. He called on 3 or 4 different tribes to come and help, and he gets 33,000 men. I think there's 135,000 of the Midianites and Amorites, but here he has 32,000. I guess he was thinking, boy, it's going to take a miracle. We were way overpowered. And God tells him unexpected. He says, you have too many men. It's like, wow. You think you have limited resources sometimes in life. God says, your resources aren't limited. You have too much. Too much. So Gideon, we don't find him arguing with God. He gave him instruction. Said, okay, anyone that's fearful. We have this word fear coming into the picture again. Anyone that's afraid, go home. And I think any soldier would be would have some fear if you're going into active duty. There would be some fear because those other men are out to kill you. Doing a little deer hunting, we're out to get those deer, but I think, wow, what would this be like if you're in wartime and there's people hunting for you and looking to finish you off? War is a horrible thing. So here we have 22,000 that are fearful. He said, go home. And there's 10,000 left. 10,000 compared to 135 is not very many. And I think, with all those people deserting the army, Gideon could be thinking, be discouraged. Like, wow, God, how in the world is this going to work? And maybe expecting some affirmation again, and God says, no, Gideon, you still have too many. Imagine how silly that would have sounded to Gideon, how scary, how fearful he could have been. But he obeys. And then, he has another test. And those that lapped at the water and those that scooped with their hand to drink. And pretty much bringing out the ones that were alert. There was only 300 of those 10,000 that were actually good, alert soldiers. And those are the ones that God wanted, the ones that weren't fearful and the ones that were alert. Finally had the few that he could use. And then verse 10, the old fear thing comes up again. God says to Gideon, well, if you're afraid, you think you'd have been afraid again? Some more fear sneaking back in? It says, if you're afraid, I'll give you some more affirmation. So you go down, you and your servant, you go down to the Midianites at nighttime and sneak in and just be a little nosy and maybe do a little eavesdropping, and I'll affirm my call in your life. Goes down and he hears two men talking, two Midianites or whoever they were, Amorites, hears them talking, and the one says, I had this dream, and he describes the dream, and the other one said, oh, that has to be the Israelites just wiping us out. And Gideon's like, wow, okay, thank you, God, thank you. Now I know that you're going to make this happen. I don't know how in the world, but yes, more affirmation. So there's 3 times here in this whole story that God gives Gideon affirmation. Had a big job, but he was fearful. The whole fear thing, and God affirms. When we're fearful, ask God, and he'll affirm you in your life and your decisions. And then Gideon tells the 300, he gives them unconventional weapons. Doesn't give them powerful weapons. He gives them a trumpet, a empty pitcher, and a lamp. How do you go kill people with an empty pitcher, a lamp, and a trumpet? So unorthodox. And Gideon could have said, you got to be kidding. No. First you take most of my soldiers away, now you want me to do this? But Gideon listened to him. Gideon listened to God. He obeyed. And he distributed these unorthodox weapons to the 300. And then what I like is Gideon says, just follow my example. So a good leader can be someone that you can follow. And all of us have people following. All of us are leaders in one way or another. We have people observing us, following us, our example. Gideon here says, just do as I do. And he gave him some instructions of what to do, and split them in 3 different groups. And they surrounded this big army that was down there in the valley, 135,000 men. 300, they were spread pretty thin, but they were to surround them. And then this is at nighttime, and they blow the trumpets, break the pictures, and have their lamps. And there's a lot of ruckus. And then they were supposed to cry out the sword of the Lord and Gideon, or the sword of, So all this yelling and crashing and lights and trumpets. And they woke up. How many ever wake up in the middle of the night to something going on, and then you're confused, like, oh, what's going on? There was a lot of confusion to the point where they were killing each other. They got their swords out. Gideon didn't need any swords. They killed each other with their swords. Started killing each other and ran for the next county. running, and those 3 tribes that originally Gideon asked, now Gideon marshals them and asks them, hey, come and chase these Midianites and these Amorites, children of the east, chase them and destroy them. So then they did use their swords. They did use their conventional weapons at that point. So, interesting story. Chapter 8, we find after all that success, after all those good things that God was doing, God was showing himself powerful. We knew it was God that was doing it. After all that, these tribes that Gideon didn't invite along were jealous of Gideon and his success. And in verse 1, it says, they chided sharply with Gideon. You ever have someone chide sharply with you? Doesn't sound like a pleasant experience. Gideon, after all this bravery that he displayed, after all his sacrifice, after all his faith in God, and obedience to God, he had people chiding sharply with him. That's not very nice. But oftentimes after a mountaintop experience in life, you'll hit a little bit of a valley. You see that in Elijah's life. You see that in our own lives. We have a mountaintop, just a wonderful experience, and then we get hit hard by some of Satan's attacks. And that's where Gideon found himself here. They were chiding sharply. They were jealous of him. But what was Gideon's response? Did he defend himself? Did he say, come on, guy? No. Gideon said, wait a minute, you did way more than I did. It was you that did all this. Look what you did. You did way more than I did. So Gideon's humble response. A soft answer turns away wrath, the proverb says. Soft answer turns away wrath. Gideon was a strong man here. He could say, no, you don't have to be jealous of me. This wasn't me. It was God. And by the way, you did way more than I did. Can we answer people like that when they chide sharply with us? I think that's a lot of maturity on Gideon's part. Moving on here in verse 22, the people want Gideon and his son and his grandson. They want 3 generations of leadership out of Gideon. They're saying, Gideon, wow, you did a great job. We want you to be our leader, and your son, and your grandson. What is Gideon's response in verse 23, chapter 7? He says, no. He says, I will not do that. God is your ruler. God will take care of you. That's God's program. I will not do that. So another example of Gideon's humility. He wasn't going to puff himself up and say, yeah, I enjoy being your leader. No. Gideon realized it was God's program, giving God the honor and the glory. He says, no, I won't do that. But then we have maybe a failure of Gideon. Gideon has an unusual request. He said, all those people that you killed, the Ishmaelites, were known for wearing jewelry. He said, take all of their gold earrings off and bring them to me. So they did that. It was 1,700 shekels of gold. And he made an ephod out of it. I guess wove in the fabric. Ephod was more of an apron type thing that the priest wore, piece of garment. He made an ephod out of it, and that became a stumbling block. The people worshipped it. And I have to think sometimes, so we have statues of famous men in America. When we go down to Washington and look around, are we sort of worshiping those strong men that helped form America? These monuments that people put up. Can that be a trap that we start putting more recognition and more credit to that person than God, and realizing it was God that did all these things? That was a problem for Gideon, and it became a stumbling block, distracting from God that did the work. Then we find in verse 28, they had peace from the Midianites and their neighbors for 40 years. So this military victory, obviously from God, lasted for 40 years. And 40 years is a long time. They had peace for 40 years because of Gideon's good work. But that as soon as, verse 34 and 35, it says, as soon as Gideon was gone, he lived to be an old man, lived a long life. As soon as he was gone, the children of Israel forgot God. Went right back into the stuff that Gideon helped deliver them from. So, and it also says they showed no respect to Gideon's family. No respect for God and no respect for Gideon's family. And that's sad. So I see in that the importance of passing along the faith to the next generation. Gideon did a lot of good work, but it didn't follow through to this next generation. The people forgot God. So none of us can rest on our laurels. No one can rest on our good heritage. Each of us personally need to take that forward and encourage our children to take it forward. You can lose a good heritage very quickly. It can be thrown out the window, thrown to the wind so quickly. And you just look around, you see examples of that. So it's imperative that we are faithful in following God in his ways, and the next generation being able to take that along. So God was able to work through Gideon despite 8 different things that I see in this story that were obstacles to success. We all have things in our lives that are obstacles to success that we have nothing to do with. Nothing to do. We have no say in some of the things that happen in our lives. And one was, Gideon says, when the angel talked to him, Gideon says, well, where is God? Where is God? He's not seeing God working. And that was an obstacle. We don't see God working. That's a problem. Second thing I see is he came from a poor family. So when there's wealth there, it gives opportunity to get things done. He says, I can't get things done. I come from a poor family. Third thing I see is he says, not only that, I'm the least in my father's family. The least. I'm not sure what made him the least, but Gideon would have said he's the least. Number 4, I see Gideon came from a family with issues. His dad worshiped Baal. That's a problem. Could he help that his dad did that? No. He was determined to do different. And God was able to use him even though he came from a family with issues. Fifth thing I see is Gideon had a target on his back. They wanted to kill him. So before this even got started, they wanted to wipe him out. And Gideon could have said, wow, this isn't going so well. Number 6, I see he was abandoned by his supporters. So when we get something going in life, we like when we have supporters, right? We need, somebody starts a mission organization or something, they need supporters. Gideon here had this 32,000 men. Most of them left. Might be a little discouraging. God was still able to use Gideon in spite of all that. He was expected to do a military victory without the proper tools. He wasn't equipped with the proper tools. And then he had to deal with people that were jealous of his success. And that wasn't nice. But Gideon had to deal with that, and he responded very well. In spite of all these obstacles, I see Gideon as a hard worker. He's working in that wine press. He wasn't just coming up with theories and things how to do this. He was doing it. He was trying hard to supply some food for his father and his family. Number 2, I see he showed hospitality to the angel. He was a hospitable man, willing to share the little that he had. He was a brave man. Even though he struggled with fear occasionally, he was a brave man. He was a humble man. He didn't need all the credit. He didn't need a special title. He was a humble man. Number 5, I see he was obedient, even when it seemed silly, even when it made no sense whatsoever. He still obeyed God. So he was obedient. And number 6, I see that he was a role model. He wasn't afraid to say, follow me. And can I say that? Can we say that in our life? Even though we have failures, can we say, follow me? And then the 7th thing, the final thing I see is he was wise and tactful. He had wisdom. So in closing, are you available for God to use in your life? And God enjoys showing himself powerful through limitations. We can say, well, I can't do that. I got limitations. No, God enjoys working through limitations. Interesting thing, just as I was putting this together, I got this update from Brian and Maria. I thought most of you probably got it, but I thought I'd read it just because I thought it was powerful. Brian Martin, in their last update, was reading, we serve a heavenly Father who is far wiser than any human parent could hope to be. And yet, we still find ourselves asking why when things happen. Our church over there in Zambia recently focused on Job and his many whys. If anyone had ever had the right to ask, it was Job. This past year left us holding a whole bundle of whys also. It has been painful, confusing, chaotic. 12 months ago, I failed a test I had spent years preparing for, an outcome that will affect us for years. It derailed long-held plans in direction we thought God was calling us toward. Excuse me. No matter how many times I asked Chat GPT, which I guess is sort of like online anyhow, he couldn't tell me why this was happening. No one knew. Why was all this happening? At the same time, we moved into my in-laws' basement, where they graciously allowed our children to redecorate their walls with crayon murals. Sort of Brian's humor coming through. As we sat through a too-cold Pennsylvania winter asking why, a gray January day brought another heavier why. My friend died. Suddenly, without warning, a workplace accident. He was an amazing man and father, and then he was gone. Some whys take a lifetime to understand. Others take a year. Now, standing here in Zambia, we can see the beginnings of answers. We are genuinely happy. We truly believe this was God's plan all along. God knew I needed a metal shop with a car lift, only 2 minutes away. God knew my family needed me present during this transition, not flying into the bush for days on end. God knew I would fit into this team and that I would love the professional level of maintenance that we do on these fancy flying metal boxes. God knew, and God still knows the answers to the whys that remain. But that was powerful. So I'd say the key takeaway this morning is surrender and trust. Surrender and trust. That's key. God knows what he has in mind for us. Trust him. He'll take care of us. Let's kneel for prayer.